The plasma cannon's whine cut through the alien jungle like a death scream. Captain Sarah Chen pressed herself against the twisted metal of her crashed dropship, watching the orange flames lick at the canopy above. The Zephyrian hunting party had found them faster than expected. "How many?" whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez, his combat suit's display flickering with damage warnings. Sarah checked her scanner. 12, maybe 15. They're moving in a circle pattern. She grimaced at the readings. The Zephyrians were methodical hunters, known throughout the galaxy for their patience and deadly precision. Their elongated skulls housed brains that could calculate trajectory and wind patterns with computer-like accuracy. Their forearms could operate multiple weapons simultaneously, while their powerful legs propelled them through terrain that would challenge most species. The distress beacon lay in pieces beside Sarah's boot. Their only hope of rescue had been destroyed in the crash. But that wasn't what made her stomach clench with dread. It was the small shelter they'd built in the dropship's cargo bay, where 5 human children huddled in terrified silence. The Meridian colony evacuation had gone wrong in every possible way. The Zephyrian fleet had arrived 3 days ahead of schedule, catching the human settlement completely unprepared. Most transports had escaped, but Sarah's ship had been tasked with retrieving stragglers from the outer settlements. She'd found the children in an abandoned research station, their parents nowhere to be found. The station's logs told a grim story of a Zephyrian raid 2 days earlier. Now those same hunters were closing in. "Captain," came a small voice from behind her. 8-year-old Tommy Park peeked out from the shelter, his dark eyes wide with fear. "Are the monsters coming back?" Sarah forced a smile. "Just stay quiet, buddy. We're going to play the hiding game, remember?" The other children pressed closer together. Marcus, age 10, tried to look brave while comforting 6-year-old twins Emma and Ethan. 13-year-old Zoe held baby Lucas against her chest, his soft breathing the only sound of innocence in this nightmare. A branch snapped somewhere in the jungle darkness. The Zephyrians were getting closer. Rodriguez checked his weapon's power cell. 15% charge left. Maybe enough for a dozen shots if I'm lucky. Sarah's rifle wasn't in much better condition. The crash had damaged most of their equipment, and they'd already been running low on supplies. 3 Marines against a dozen alien hunters with no backup coming and 5 children to protect. The mathematics were brutally simple. She'd read the reports about Zephyrian hunting practices. They preferred live prey, especially young specimens. The children would be taken as trophies, kept alive just long enough to provide entertainment before the final hunt. The thought made her hands shake with rage. "Rodriguez, I want you to take the kids and move deeper into the ship. Find the secondary cargo bay and barricade yourselves in." "What about you?" "Captain, someone needs to slow them down." Sarah ejected her rifle's power cell and checked the charge. "Buy you time to find another way out." "There is no other way out." "Then make one." Another branch snapped, closer this time. Through the jungle's gloom, Sarah caught a glimpse of movement. The Zephyrians moved with an eerie grace, their mottled green skin blending perfectly with the alien foliage. They communicated through subtle clicking sounds that barely registered above the ambient jungle noise. Rodriguez gathered the children, speaking in soft, urgent tones. "Come on, kids. We're going to play another game now. Follow me and stay very, very quiet." As they disappeared into the ship's twisted interior, Sarah took position behind a fallen beam. The Zephyrians would expect human tactics, defensive positions, covering fire, attempts to establish communication. They wouldn't expect what she was actually planning. She pulled a grenade from her belt and examined its timer mechanism. Standard-issue thermite, designed for breaching operations. In the right conditions, it could burn hot enough to melt through starship hulls. The jungle around them was tinder dry after months without rain. The first Zephyrian appeared at the edge of the clearing, its elongated head sweeping back and forth as it scanned for movement. Sarah held perfectly still, controlling her breathing. The alien's 4 arms each held a different weapon: pulse rifle, plasma caster, neural disruptor, and some kind of energized blade that hummed with barely contained power. More hunters emerged from the tree line. Sarah counted them carefully. 14 in total, moving with the coordinated precision of a pack that had hunted together for years. They wore minimal armor, relying instead on speed and natural camouflage. Their leader, distinguished by ritual scarring across its elongated skull, gestured with 2 arms while keeping the others trained on potential threat vectors. Sarah had studied Zephyrian culture during her officer training. They viewed hunting as the highest form of art, a spiritual practice that connected them to their ancestors. Each successful hunt was celebrated with elaborate ceremonies, and the trophies were preserved for generations. The thought of these children becoming part of such a collection filled her with cold determination. The lead hunter approached the crashed dropship, its head tilted in a gesture that might have been curiosity. It clicked something to its companions, who began spreading out in a wider circle. They knew their prey was here somewhere. Sarah waited until the leader was directly in front of her hiding spot, then activated the grenade's timer. 3 seconds. She hurled it not at the hunters, but into the driest section of jungle canopy above them. The thermite explosion lit up the night like a miniature sun. Burning fragments rained down on the Zephyrians, who scattered with surprising speed. But Sarah wasn't trying to kill them with the blast. She was creating something much more dangerous. The alien vegetation caught fire with frightening intensity. Within seconds, flames were spreading through the canopy in all directions. The Zephyrians found themselves in the center of a rapidly expanding inferno. Their perfect ambush position transformed into a trap. Sarah used the confusion to relocate, moving through the smoke toward where Rodriguez and the children were hiding. The Zephyrians' clicking communication became more urgent as they realized their predicament. Fire was one of the few things that could disrupt their enhanced senses, filling the air with smoke and overwhelming heat signatures. She reached the secondary cargo bay just as Rodriguez was welding the door shut with an emergency torch. "Change of plans," she gasped, smoke burning her lungs. "We're going to have company very soon." "The fire won't stop them," Rodriguez replied grimly. "They'll just wait it out." "No, they won't." Sarah checked her rifle's charge again, still enough for a few shots. "Fire makes them angry, reckless. They'll come straight at us now." All coordination forgotten. Tommy tugged at her combat suit. "Captain, why are the monsters so angry?" Sarah knelt down to his level, meeting his frightened gaze. "Because we're not acting like prey anymore, Tommy. We're fighting back." The sound of rending metal echoed through the ship as the first Zephyrian began cutting through the outer hull. Sarah positioned herself at the cargo bay's entrance while Rodriguez herded the children into the farthest corner. The space was cramped and filled with emergency supplies, but it was the most defensible position they had. "Zoe, I need you to take care of the little ones," Sarah said quietly. "Can you do that for me?" The 13-year-old nodded, her jaw set with determination that reminded Sarah painfully of herself at that age. "Yes, ma'am. Marcus, Emma, Ethan. You stay close to Zoe and do exactly what she says. Rodriguez and I are going to make sure nothing bad happens to you." The metal cutting sounds grew closer. Through the smoke drifting in from outside, Sarah could hear the Zephyrians' clicking becoming more frenzied. The fire had spread further than she'd hoped, turning the entire jungle clearing into a blazing hell. But it wouldn't last forever. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, checking his rifle's power readout. "When this is over, however it ends, I want you to know it's been an honor serving with you." Sarah smiled grimly. "Save the speeches for later, Lieutenant. We're not dead yet." The first Zephyrian burst through the outer hull in a shower of sparks and melted metal. Sarah's first shot caught its center mass, the energy bolt burning through its chest and dropping it instantly. The second hunter was more cautious, using its fallen companion as cover while it returned fire with deadly accuracy. Plasma bolts scorched the air around Sarah's head as she ducked back into cover. The Zephyrians were angry now, all strategy abandoned in favor of brutal assault. More of them poured through the breach, their four-armed firing patterns creating a devastating crossfire. Rodriguez added his fire to Sarah's, their rifles cutting down two more hunters before the aliens adapted to their position. Then the ammunition counter on Sarah's weapon hit 0. As she reached for her sidearm, knowing it would be useless against Zephyrian armor, she heard Tommy's voice behind her. "Captain Beer, they're trying to get in through the roof, too." Sarah looked up to see plasma cutters beginning to slice through the cargo bay's ceiling. They were about to be surrounded with nowhere left to run. But instead of despair, she felt a strange calm settling over her. She'd kept the children alive this long. That had to count for something. "Rodriguez, new plan. When I say go, you take the kids and run for the main cargo bay. I'll hold them here as long as I can." "Captain, that's suicide." "No," Sarah replied, pulling the pins from her remaining grenades. "That's buying time." Outside, the jungle fire had reached its peak intensity, turning night into an orange nightmare that reflected off the smoke-filled air. The Zephyrians' hunting cries echoed through the burning forest as more of them poured into the ship. Sarah looked back at the 5 young faces, depending on her, and made her choice. The grenades detonated in sequence, each explosion shaking the damaged dropship like an earthquake. Sarah had thrown them not at the Zephyrians, but at the structural supports holding up the cargo bay's ceiling. Ancient human engineering met alien metallurgy in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The section of roof the hunters had been cutting through collapsed inward, crushing 2 of them instantly and trapping 3 others under a pile of debris, their alien screams mixed with the crackle of spreading flames as the fire found new fuel in the ship's composite materials. "Go!" Sarah shouted, shoving Rodriguez toward the children. "Get them out of here!" But Rodriguez had already seen what she was really doing. Instead of creating an escape route, Sarah had sealed them all inside a burning tomb. The main exits were blocked by debris, the hull breaches were filled with flames, and the Zephyrians still alive were now completely enraged. "There's nowhere to run!" Rodriguez grabbed her arm. "You've trapped us in here with them!" Sarah's eyes blazed with the same intensity as the fires around them. "Good. Now they can't escape either." The lead Zephyrian hunter, its ritual scars now complemented by fresh burns, emerged from the smoke like a nightmare given form. 2 of its 4 arms hung useless, damaged in the collapse, but the remaining 2 still held functional weapons. Its elongated head turned toward the children with predatory focus. "You fight without honor, human," it hissed in heavily accented standard. "But your younglings will make fine trophies." "Over my dead body," Sarah snarled back, raising her sidearm. "That can be arranged." The Zephyrian's plasma rifle whined as it charged, but Sarah was already moving. She dove sideways, rolling behind a fallen support beam as superheated energy scorched the air where she'd been standing. The shot hit the wall behind her, melting through metal and starting another small fire. Rodriguez had gathered the children in the corner, using his body to shield them from the worst of the smoke and heat. Tommy was crying now, overwhelmed by the noise and chaos. Emma and Ethan clung to each other while Marcus tried to comfort baby Lucas. Zoe watched the battle with wide eyes, her young mind trying to process the violence. "Why won't they just leave us alone?" Marcus whispered. "Because they're monsters," Zoe replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "And Captain Sarah is going to stop them." Sarah heard this exchange as she dodged another plasma blast. The Zephyrian was methodically destroying her cover, burning through the metal beam piece by piece. She had maybe 6 shots left in her sidearm, nowhere to run, and 3 more hunters still moving somewhere in the smoke-filled chaos. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself the way her combat instructors had taught her. Fear was a tool if you knew how to use it. Anger was fuel if you could control the burn. And determination could overcome impossible odds if you were willing to pay any price. When she opened her eyes again, Sarah Chen was no longer just a human officer trying to survive. She was a mother protecting her children, a guardian standing against the dark, a representative of everything humanity could become when pushed beyond its limits. The next plasma shot missed by inches, close enough to singe her hair. Sarah used the Zephyrian's targeting delay to sprint across the open space, firing 3 rapid shots that forced the alien to take cover. Her rounds sparked off its makeshift shield, but the real purpose was to get closer. Zephyrians were ambush predators, used to fighting from distance with superior technology and numerical advantage. They weren't prepared for humans who ignored their own safety and closed to knife-fighting range. Sarah vaulted over a pile of debris and landed behind the lead hunter before it could turn around. Her combat knife, heated red-hot by the ambient fires, plunged between its shoulder blades and found something vital. The alien's death scream was cut short as Sarah's blade severed its spinal cord. 2 more Zephyrians emerged from the smoke, firing wildly in her direction. Sarah grabbed their dead leader's plasma rifle and rolled for new cover, the weapon's alien design somehow intuitive in her hands. Humans had always been good at adapting other species' technology. The plasma rifle's targeting system painted hostile signatures through the smoke. Sarah could see all 3 remaining hunters now, moving to surround her position. They were being more careful now, treating her as a genuine threat rather than cornered prey. She used this caution against them, firing single shots to keep them pinned down while she maneuvered around the wreckage. The cargo bay was becoming an oven as multiple fires merged into a single inferno, but the heat affected the Zephyrians more than it did her. Their cold-blooded physiology struggled with extreme temperatures. "Captain!" Zoe's voice cut through the noise. "Behind you!" Sarah spun just as a Zephyrian dropped from the damaged ceiling, all 4 of its arms reaching for her with various weapons. She managed to get the plasma rifle up in time to block its energized blade. The 2 weapons locked together in a shower of sparks. The alien was stronger than her, its 4-armed grip giving it mechanical advantage. But Sarah had spent years training in zero-gravity combat, where leverage mattered more than raw strength. She used the Zephyrian's forward momentum against it, falling backward and planting her feet in its stomach to launch it over her head into the burning wreckage behind her. The hunter's scream was abruptly cut off as it hit a piece of superheated metal. The smell of burning flesh joined the cocktail of smoke and melted plastic filling the air. 2 left. Sarah retrieved the plasma rifle and checked its power level. Half charge remaining. Enough for maybe 8 shots if she was conservative. The surviving Zephyrians had learned to respect her now, keeping their distance and coordinating their attacks. Their clicking communication had become terse, professional. They were treating her like a real opponent. "Rodriguez, how are the kids?" Scared but alive. "The smoke's getting pretty thick back here." Sarah could hear it in his voice. The lieutenant was trying not to cough, trying to stay strong for the children, but the air was becoming toxic. They had maybe 10 minutes before carbon monoxide poisoning became a serious problem. Through the haze, she caught movement near the main hull breach. One of the Zephyrians was trying to flank around behind Rodriguez's position. If it succeeded, the children would be caught in a crossfire. Sarah made her decision. Instead of taking the safe shot from cover, she stepped into the open and fired 3 rapid plasma bolts at the flanking hunter. The first shot missed, the second scored a glancing hit on its shoulder, and the third punched through its center mass in a spray of alien blood. But her attack exposed her to the final Zephyrian, who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Its return fire caught Sarah in the left shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing into a pile of debris. The plasma rifle flew from her hands, skittering away across the metal floor. Pain exploded through her body as she tried to get up. The plasma burn had gone deep, possibly hitting bone. Her left arm hung useless at her side, and she could smell her own cooking flesh. But she forced herself to keep moving, crawling toward her fallen weapon. The last Zephyrian approached slowly, savoring its victory. "You fought well, human, for prey, but now the hunt ends." It raised its plasma rifle, taking careful aim at Sarah's head. Behind it, Rodriguez was shouting something, but the words seemed to come from very far away. Sarah's vision was starting to tunnel from blood loss and smoke inhalation. She reached out with her good arm, fingers stretching toward the dropped plasma rifle. Too far. Just a few inches too far. "Captain!" Tommy's small voice pierced through her fading consciousness. "Don't give up!" The words hit Sarah like an electric shock. She looked back at the 5 young faces depending on her, saw the trust and hope still burning in their eyes despite everything. These children believed in her. They believed that somehow she would find a way to save them. And maybe that belief was enough. Sarah Chen had never been the strongest officer in the Colonial Marines. She wasn't the fastest, wasn't the smartest, wasn't the best shot. But she had something that couldn't be taught or trained or enhanced with technology. She had the absolute refusal to give up when people she cared about were in danger. With a roar that was half pain and half pure fury, Sarah lunged forward and grabbed the plasma rifle. The Zephyrian's shot missed by millimeters, scorching the floor where her head had been. She rolled onto her back and fired upward, the plasma bolt catching the alien hunter squarely in its elongated skull. The last Zephyrian toppled backward into the flames, its hunting cry transformed into a death rattle. Silence fell over the cargo bay, broken only by the crackle of fire and the children's frightened breathing. Sarah lay on the burning deck, staring up at the smoke-filled air, hardly able to believe they were still alive. "Captain?" Rodriguez's voice was hoarse from smoke. "Are you hit bad?" "I'll live." Sarah forced herself to sit up, cradling her burned arm. "For now. But we need to get out of here before this whole section collapses." She looked around at the burning wreckage that had been their battlefield. Dead Zephyrians lay scattered among the twisted metal, their perfect hunting formation reduced to smoking corpses. The fires were spreading faster now, fed by ruptured fuel lines and damaged environmental systems. "Rodriguez, grab anything useful from the emergency supplies. We're leaving." "Where exactly are we going, Captain? The whole jungle's on fire." Sarah smiled grimly as she helped him gather the children. "Into the fire. It's the last place they'll expect us to go." The jungle burned around them like the end of the world. Sarah led the small group through a landscape transformed into hell itself, where every tree had become a torch and the ground cracked from the intense heat. The emergency thermal suits she'd grabbed from the ship's supplies were the only thing keeping them alive in the superheated air. Tommy stumbled, his small legs struggling to keep up. Without hesitation, Sarah scooped him up with her good arm, ignoring the fresh wave of pain from her plasma burn. "Stay close to me, buddy. We're almost there." "Where is there?" Rodriguez asked, his voice muffled by his suit's respirator. He was carrying baby Lucas, while Zoe helped the twins navigate through the burning debris. Sarah pointed toward a distant ridge, barely visible through the smoke. "The old mining complex. If the geological surveys were right, there should be natural caves underneath. Stone doesn't burn." They moved single file through the inferno, following what had once been a game trail. The heat was so intense that even the rocks were starting to crack and split. Sarah's scanner showed temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Celsius in some areas. Without the thermal suits, they would have been cooked alive in seconds. "Captain," Marcus gasped, his young voice tight with exhaustion, "how do you know about caves?" "I studied every inch of this planet before we came down," Sarah replied. stepping carefully over a fallen tree that glowed like a massive ember. A Marine's job is to know the terrain better than the enemy. The truth was more complex. Sarah had spent sleepless nights memorizing geological surveys, topographical maps, and xenobiology reports. Not because regulations required it, but because she'd learned long ago that knowledge could mean the difference between life and death. She'd lost too many good people to poor planning and incomplete intelligence. A tree crashed down behind them, sending up a shower of sparks and burning fragments. The fire was moving faster now, driven by winds created by its own convection. They had maybe 30 minutes before the entire ridge was engulfed. "There!" Sarah pointed through the smoke at a dark opening in the hillside. The mine entrance was exactly where the surveys had indicated, though half collapsed from decades of abandonment. They reached the cave mouth as another wave of superheated air swept over them. Sarah helped each child through the narrow opening before following with Rodriguez. Inside, the temperature dropped dramatically, though the air still carried the acrid smell of smoke. The cave extended deeper into the hillside than expected, with rough-hewn walls that spoke of human engineering rather than natural formation. Emergency glow sticks from their suits provided enough light to see that they were in some kind of old mining tunnel. "How deep does this go?" Rodriguez asked, settling baby Lucas carefully on a dry patch of stone. Sarah consulted her scanner, which was having trouble penetrating the rock. "Deep enough. The miners must have followed a mineral vein pretty far underground." They moved deeper into the tunnel, putting distance between themselves and the inferno outside. The air gradually cleared, though Sarah could still hear the distant roar of the burning jungle. Every step took them further from immediate danger and closer to an uncertain future. After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a natural cavern where the mining operation had intersected with an underground cave system. Ancient limestone formations created cathedral-like spaces filled with the sound of dripping water. Most importantly, the air here was clean and cool. Sarah finally allowed herself to remove her helmet, breathing deeply for the first time in hours. The children followed suit, their faces streaked with soot but alive and unharmed. "Are we safe now?" Emma asked, leaning against her twin brother. "Safer," Sarah replied carefully. "But we still need to find a way off this planet." She inventoried their supplies while Rodriguez tended to baby Lucas. 2 days' worth of food if they rationed carefully. Water purification tablets and enough ammunition for maybe one more fight. An emergency beacon with a cracked case that might or might not be able to transmit through the rock. But they were alive. All 6 of them had survived when the odds said they shouldn't have. "Captain," Zoe said quietly, sitting on a ledge with her feet dangling over empty space. "What happened to our parents?" Sarah had been dreading this question. She'd seen the research station's logs, knew what had happened to the adult civilians. But these children had been through enough trauma for one day. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I promise you, we're going to find out. And until we do, you're stuck with Lieutenant Rodriguez and me." "Are you going to adopt us?" Tommy asked with the direct curiosity of childhood. The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd never seriously considered having children of her own. Her career in the Colonial Marines had always come first, leaving little room for family or personal relationships. But looking at these 5 young faces, seeing the trust and hope in their eyes, she felt something fundamental shift inside her. "If that's what it takes to keep you safe," she said quietly. Rodriguez was examining the emergency beacon, frowning at its damaged components. "The transmitter's intact, but I can't get a clear signal through all this rock. We'd need to get back to the surface." "Not while the fire's still burning. It'll be days before the jungle cools enough for us to move safely." "What about the Zephyrians? Were those all of them?" Sarah considered the question. Probably not. Hunting parties usually travel in larger groups. but the fire will keep the rest of them away for now. She didn't mention that Zephyrian ships would eventually come looking for their missing hunters, or that human rescue operations might write off this region as a total loss. They had bought themselves time, not safety. "So, what do we do now?" Marcus asked. "Now we wait, and while we wait, we plan." Sarah found a flat section of cave floor and began sketching a rough map with a piece of charcoal. "The fire will burn itself out eventually. When it does, we'll have a clear path to the old communications array on the northern ridge. If we can get it working, we can send a distress signal." "How far is that?" Zoe asked. 40 kilometers, maybe 3 days' walk if we take it easy." "With children?" Rodriguez looked skeptical. "These aren't ordinary children anymore," Sarah replied, looking at each young face in turn. "They've survived a Zephyrian hunting party and walked through fire. They're tougher than they look." Tommy beamed at the praise. Even Emma and Ethan stood a little straighter. Sarah realized she was watching them transform from victims into survivors, seeing the same resilience that had carried humanity to the stars. Over the next several hours, they established a routine. Rodriguez kept watch at the cave entrance, while Sarah tended to her plasma burn with supplies from the emergency kit. The children explored the deeper caverns, their voices echoing back with small discoveries and moments of wonder. It was Zoe who found the old mining equipment in a side chamber, including a working fusion cell that had been powering emergency lights for decades. Sarah immediately saw the possibilities. "Rodriguez, take a look at this. Think we can rig the beacon to use this power source?" The lieutenant examined the fusion cell's output connections. "Maybe. It's an old standard, but the adapters should work." While they worked on the technical problems, Sarah found herself watching the children with new eyes. Marcus was naturally protective of the younger ones, already showing leadership qualities. The twins had stopped crying and started helping with small tasks. Zoe displayed a curious intelligence that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. And Tommy had appointed himself as the group's morale officer, telling jokes and stories that made everyone smile despite their circumstances. "You know," Rodriguez said quietly as they spliced power cables together, "I've never seen anything like what you did back there, taking on a full Zephyrian hunting party with just small arms. Desperation makes people do impossible things. No, it was more than that. You fought like—" Rodriguez struggled for the right words. "Like a human being defending her cubs. There's something about our species, isn't there? When we're backed into a corner, when everything we care about is threatened, we become something more than what we were." Sarah thought about the stories she'd heard from other worlds, humans holding impossible defensive positions, human colonists fighting off alien predators with improvised weapons, human rescue teams walking through radiation and vacuum to save strangers. "Maybe that's what makes us human," she said. "We don't know when to quit." The beacon suddenly crackled to life, its display showing a strong signal bouncing off the cave walls and somehow finding a path to the surface. Rodriguez had managed to jury-rig a connection that turned the entire cave system into a giant antenna. "Colonial Marine Emergency Frequency," Sarah broadcast. "This is Captain Chen. Survivor Group of 6 requesting immediate extraction. Coordinates follow." The response came within minutes. "Captain Chen, this is Admiral Foster aboard the CNS Defiant. We've been looking for you for 2 days. Are you and your team secure?" "Secure for now, Admiral. But we have 5 civilian children with us and limited supplies." "Understood. Extraction team is en route. ETA 4 hours." Sarah set down the communicator and looked around at her small group. Rodriguez was grinning with relief. The children were cheering and hugging each other. Baby Lucas was even clapping his tiny hands. But Sarah felt something deeper than relief. For the first time in her military career, she'd found something worth more than duty or honor, or even survival. She'd found family. 4 hours later, As the rescue shuttles touched down in the still smoking jungle, Sarah Chen emerged from the caves carrying baby Lucas, while the other 4 children walked proudly beside her. She'd lost a dropship and most of her equipment, but she'd gained something infinitely more valuable. The rescue team's medic immediately began treating her plasma burn while the children were checked for smoke inhalation and exhaustion. Through the shuttle's viewport, Sarah could see the devastation they'd left behind. Square kilometers of jungle reduced to ash and smoking stumps. "Quite a fire you started down there, Captain," Admiral Foster commented, reviewing her after-action report. "The Zephyrians are calling it an act of ecological terrorism." "Good," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Let them remember that humans fight differently when our children are threatened." The Admiral smiled. "The Colonial Council is already drafting new protocols based on your actions. Seems like single human defenders are worth more than we calculated." As the shuttle lifted off toward the safety of orbital space, Tommy looked up at Sarah from his seat beside her. "Captain, are you really going to adopt us?" Sarah looked around at the 5 young faces depending on her, these children who'd walked through fire and come out stronger. Her career would change. Her life would never be the same. But some things were worth any sacrifice. "If you'll have me," she said quietly. The children's unanimous yes rang through the shuttle bay like a victory cry. Later, as they approached the CNS Defiant, Sarah realized that the rescue teams would find more than just the wreckage of a dropship down there. They'd find the remains of an entire Zephyrian hunting party taken down by one human woman who refused to let anything happen to her children. The story would spread throughout the galaxy, adding another chapter to humanity's growing reputation, not as conquerors or explorers, but as the species that absolutely would not quit when defending what they loved. The Lair had indeed blazed to ash, but from those ashes had emerged something new, a family forged in fire, and the legend of the human spirit that nothing in the galaxy could break.